With me, Newsmax CEO and longtime friend of President Trump, Christopher Ruddy. Nice to see you.
Greta, great to be on with you.
Okay, do you have any idea how this firing is resonating within sort of the Trump circle, his friends or the White House or associates or business? Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, I think people that know the president know that he's the type of guy that would not be trying to close down an investigation. And they see the relentless spin. You know, Bill Clinton fired Judge Sessions, the FBI director, in 1993 on grounds far less convincing than what the president had. He had very serious concerns about Director Comey. And it was a one-day news story. You remember back then, Greta, it was a one-day news story. Nobody said there was anything improper. It was in the purview of the president to do this. And what we're seeing, I'm watching some of these cable shows, they're talking about impeachment, they're talking about he was trying to close down. What investigation has President Trump sought to close down? He's not directing the FBI to close down any investigation. If anything, this is going to heighten interest by the press and the public and Congress in this investigation. I don't think that's what the president intended, but I think it will be a heightened interest.
Does he have a bit of, I mean, if I take your view on it, or your thoughts, does he have perhaps a tin ear on this? Because he happened to have done it in the midst of the Russian investigation, which is, though, on the heels of this letter from the Deputy Attorney General, which it says the reason for the firing is the mishandling of the email investigation, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, which if that were the reason, you would think that he would have fired him on day one of the Trump presidency, which is 112 days and some change ago, instead of waiting till right now, right after Comey testifies and says some things that I'm sure the president didn't like.
Well, I think the president, if he made a mistake, he didn't fire him sooner. He should have done it on Inauguration Day because, frankly, I think the Director Comey had lost the confidence of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats. You could look at the reels going back and the clips and see Chuck Schumer and many Democrats calling for him to leave the FBI. I thought what he said many of the statements he made during the Hillary Clinton email were over the top and not what we would expect an FBI director. And he just gave testimony.
So why did he wait? So why did he wait? I mean, because, you know, the problem is, you know, that's still something that I don't understand why he waited. Maybe he's too busy with other things in a new administration. I don't know, but I'm just saying that's a suspicious sticking point.
Well, I think it's a legitimate question, but then remember, and you've seen the press reports, that just over a week ago, Director Comey gave testimony, and he said that he was nauseous thinking about the fact that he possibly or probably impacted the election. I think that's a pretty serious revelation. And then some of the other things that he said in that testimony, I think there's general agreement that what he had made in public disclosures about investigations is not in keeping and consistent with the legal process that FBI directors usually adhere to. So he made these comments, and apparently, according to press reports, the president didn't tell me this, he was pretty miffed by some of the things he said at that hearing, and even suggesting that he might have interfered. You know, he violated longtime Justice Department. You're a lawyer, so you know this. They're not supposed to come out 30 to 60 days before an election with potentially damaging information in an investigation, and they certainly did that.
Christopher Ruddy, thank you. Newsmax, thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.